Welcome to Philosophy and Critical Thinking, the basics. Today we're going to be talking about what arguments are. A lot of people have an idea of arguments as when we're yelling or name calling or angry. These are not necessarily what arguments are. Arguments can turn out that way, but that's not what makes them arguments. Arguments can be something very good, something we can look forward to doing and get really positive outcomes from. So we're going to be talking about what arguments actually are in the world of philosophy. Arguments are when we use reasons to believe something. If I were to say to you, hey, you should vote for this political party, and you said back, why should I vote for them? You're asking me to give an argument, because you're asking me for me to give a reason to why you should vote for that political party. In philosophy, there are some terms that would be useful to know, because they're going to come up a lot if you're going to start reading philosophical literature, and so you'll need to know these terms. The word we use for reasons in an argument is called a premise, or premises when there's more than one. The belief that we're giving reasons for is called the conclusion. So when we put these terms together, we can come to a more technical definition in philosophy when we're talking about arguments. And that is that arguments are when we use premises to justify a conclusion. So in common language, we can just say arguments are when we use reasons to justify a belief or justify a claim, those kinds of things. But in the technical terms, arguments are when we use premises to justify a conclusion. So when we're listening to an argument being given, or you're reading an argument that's been written down, we need to know what the premises are and what the conclusion is. We can do this by looking very carefully at the language being used. In order to know what the premises are, we look for premise indicators. Premise indicators can be words like because, since, given that, since it's the case that. Those kinds of words are premise indicators. What we can tell from a premise indicator is whatever is said after that word being used is the argument's premise. And then we'll have conclusion indicators. Conclusion indicators are words like so, therefore, thus, hence. These words are when whatever is said after these terms being used is the argument's conclusion. So let's look at this first argument here. All humans will eventually die. I am a human, so I'll eventually die. Look at the word so. So that's our conclusion indicator. So we can see that I'll eventually die is the argument's conclusion. What I'm trying to argue for is that I'll eventually die. And so from knowing that, the two sentences prior to this are the argument's premises. Premise 1 would be all humans will eventually die, and premise 2 would be I am a human. So that's how we can identify the first argument. Now look at the second argument here. I'll eventually die because I'm a human, and all humans will eventually die. Looking at the word because. The because is the premise indicator, so we can tell that the sentence I am human and all humans will eventually die are the premises, and since we've identified the premises, the words before that, I'll eventually die, is the argument's conclusion. Once we know what the premises are and what the conclusion is, in philosophy there's a method we use called putting the argument into standard form. Standard form is when we list in hierarchical order all the premises, and then we separate the conclusion by putting the word therefore in between all of the premises and then the argument's conclusion. Sometimes we'll number them we can refer to them later on, but the benefit from this is we can see the argument with a lot more clarity, and when we start to understand what makes good arguments from bad arguments, we can use this to help analyze them with a lot more ease. So as you can see here, you have premise 1, all humans will eventually die. Premise 2, I am a human. We use the therefore symbol to separate to the conclusion. Number 3, I'll eventually die. So now we can understand what arguments are. If you want more details on this, you can come to the website on www.philosophycriticalthinking.com, and that can go for a bit more detail. And there's some test questions there if you want to test yourself on this. Also, if you click on one of the links in the description or through the website, I highly recommend the book Understanding Arguments by Walter Sinnott Armstrong and Robert Fogelin. That was actually my first book when I started my philosophical journey, and I highly recommend it. The next video that I'll be putting up is Why We Argue, going through the goals of arguing, what we should be trying to get out of an argument. If you like this video and you want to stay in tune for more tutorials, please click the subscribe button and click the bell. Thanks.